Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Securing Your Business, Essential Protection Strategies for Business Owners. I'm Claire Hara, the Wealth Management and Insurance Reporter here at the Globe and Mail, and I'm pleased to be your host and moderator today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which the Globe and Mail headquarters is situated is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis Nation, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land. In an era where innovation moves faster than ever, entrepreneurs face not only the challenge of building and scaling their ventures, but also of protecting what they've built, whether that's their intellectual property, their data, their finances, or even their brand reputation. So today's discussion brings together a distinguished panel of experts who will share practical insights on safeguarding your business, covering legal protections, cybersecurity, insurance needs, and strategic planning. Our goal is to empower you with the knowledge and tools to anticipate risks and protect your assets. Today's event is presented with support from Richter, and we are pleased to have a representative from Richter on our panel today, along with the other speakers who are going to be sharing their views independently. As we go along, please type your questions into the Q&A box on your screen, and we will get to as many as we can a little later on. But first, let's introduce today's panelists. First, we have Tasso Lagios, Managing Partner at Richter. We have Wayne Harris, Financial Security Advisor at Wayne Harris Consulting. And Erica Herbert, Co-owner and Chief Operating Officer at Ode Toronto. Welcome, everyone, to today's discussion. So we're going to just jump right into it. And I'm sure everyone who's tuned in today, or anyone who's ever considered launching their own business, knows that there's a mountain of paperwork, meetings, and legal contracts that can pile up. So Tasso, I thought maybe we could start off with you today and really break down what are the range of risks that business owners need to be aware of, and how can that change over time?
Thank you, Claire. So look, the range of risks kind of are quite broad, and they cover a lot of different areas, both at the business level, but also at the shareholder and the ownership level. And those are different types of risk, and each of those need to be managed at all times by all business owners. The question is, where do they put more emphasis and at what point in time? So obviously, at the very beginning, it's important to address some of the shareholder ownership issues, and those need to be put in place at the very start. But typically, the owner and the operators and the business owners quickly move to the business itself and try to manage some of the risks that I'm sure we're going to cover a little later on, but a lot of the business operational risks that they want to make sure are well covered. And, as the business continues and evolves and matures, some of those risks sometimes move back up to sort of shareholder matters and really more strategic matters about where the business needs to go. Things such as, succession, things like where will the business go on a longer term basis? What does the business represent to the family and the owners of such businesses? And will it stay in the business? Will they divest? Will they bring people from the outside to help them run? So I think it moves around. And I always say that, business owners manage risk on a continuous basis. Sometimes they don't even know they're managing risk, but it's on a constant basis. It's making decisions, but then managing the risks associated with those decisions. So that's how I kind of cover risk at a broad level. It's everywhere within any business operations.
Mm-hmm. So Wayne, I want to jump over to you. As Tasso listed off, there's probably hundreds of risks that we could get into today, but I want to get a little bit nitty gritty. And I know one of your expertise is around insurance, and that's something that can be done to manage risk. But maybe you can walk us through what some of those insurance things could be. And I know to be very nitty gritty, very specific, that there is a corporate owned life insurance policy that they can be used. Maybe you can talk us through that as well.
Thank you, Claire. I think it's kind of interesting that people have insurance on their cars, insurance on their homes, insurance on their cell phones, but don't have insurance on their corporations. I find it interesting because what's going to happen? We know there are two things that are guaranteed in life. One is death and one is taxes. And you can do something about one of them. You can't do something about the other. So insurance is basically giving you the opportunity to mitigate your taxes and provide your business with the worst case scenario coverage. Corporate owned life insurance is very different than personal life insurance because it's coming through the corporation. The corporation will own the policy, and the corporation may be the beneficiary of the policy. The insured are the key people in the company. And the reason you want to have key person insurance is because the person who is running the company, the owner, is very strategic to the company. What if they have outstanding loans and the lenders are saying, well, if this person's gone, they're the expertise. I don't know if I want to lend money anymore. So you need to have the key people covered in the company, but it can't just be the owners. It can be key shareholders. It can also be key executives. It can also be the person who has the secret sauce, the 11 herbs and spices of whatever you're doing. That person in operations or engineering might be a key person as well. It also might be the salesperson in your company that has the best relationships with your biggest clients. So you want to have insurance to cover these key people. There are many different ways to implement corporate owned insurance, but key person is the main one. Another one you might want to look at is for the buy sell agreements. If someone comes in and they have their spouse and one of the partners dies, maybe the corporate colors are purple, and now the spouse comes in and says, I'll take 50% of my husband's shares and I want everything to be pink. Well, rather than dealing with that, you can now have the insurance, and that insurance policy can pay out to that individual and they can move on with a fair market assessment of what the company was worth. So everyone is being treated fairly. But you also need the key person insurance because while you're waiting for that person, let's say they didn't pass away, they're just very, very sick and they're going to be convalescing for many months. You can use some of that money to help find a replacement or mitigate other risk or pay off loans and other things while we wait for this person to come back. So there's a life insurance component, but there's also a critical illness component. If someone loses consciousness or is unavailable for many months or years, you will have the money to replace that person and replace that expertise that you're looking for to keep the company going.
And you talked a bit about, we always hear about life insurance as part of a long-term retirement strategy. How is that different for an incorporated business owner?
Great question, Claire. There are really a couple of ways to do it. One is an insured retirement strategy where you will buy a policy through the corporation and put down lump sums for maybe 10 years. And once the policy is paid up in 10 years, 20 years down the road, you can use the money from the policy as a retirement strategy. You can take the money out in cash, or you can borrow against the disbursements, and then there's no tax implication when you do it that way. There's also the immediate financing agreement where you can put money into a policy, lump sums, and you can borrow immediately, almost immediately, within 3 days, and use that cash for other investments. And depending on what type of investment you have, it could be tax deductible. So it gives you immediate access to the cash. You're getting the policy, you're getting the death benefit, but you're leveraging the cash value while you're alive. And you can do that multiple ways with corporate life insurance.
And lastly, I know these are pretty complex strategies, but when should a company maybe consider using some of these insurance policies or introducing them into the company?
Honestly, the best time is when you started. The next best time is when you meet with me. I think that there's a trinity of resources that you can use. One is your accountant. Your accountant is key in helping you structure your business. The second is your friendly neighborhood financial security advisor. And third at the table would be your lawyer when and if required. But the three of us with the business owner will work together to put together the best package and strategies for the company, not only for operations today, but also for succession planning in the future. Should the owner or owners not make it to end of job, the next generation needs to have all the documentation in place to have a smooth transition between generations, because that's usually the main pothole that businesses fall into. I have my business, I've been running it well, my team is solid, and then something disruptive happens. And now we need to have the plan. But it's a little bit late to have the plan. We need to have the plan up front. And that's why the folks at Richter, myself, and we bring in the appropriate lawyer, we can make that happen for you.
Great. So like all insurance, the sooner the better. So
Exactly.
I want to get over to Erica. We're extremely lucky to have a business owner on the panel today. And Erica, maybe you can start us off with giving us a little bit of an overview of your journey as being a boutique hotel owner. You know, how did you come about launching your company? And maybe tell us a little bit about the name of your company.
Thanks, Claire. So the name of my company is Ode Toronto, and the name is unique because Ode really means giving honor to. So it's really ode to hospitality. My company, or my hotel, I run it with my 4 children, and we are located in Dundas West. The neighborhood is amazing. We are very much family run, and something good came out of COVID, because Ode came out of COVID. During this time, we got together as a family. The brainchild behind Ode is, I always say, is Tiffany, who sitting at the table one day. We have these units. We had the building before COVID, and we have these units, and the world had shut down for 2 years. And she reached out to neighborhood artists. So Dundas West is a very geared toward art and artists in this very arts focus. So at Artscape, which is at Dundas and Shaw, Tiffany reached out to different local artists, different furniture makers, and out of that brainchild, we had the units, and every unit became a canvas for different artists. And from the art came the furniture, and from the furniture, we have these units that are completely unique and different in the industry and in the hotel industry. So we're moving forward. Now we're into 2021. Tiffany's a corporate lawyer in the family, registered the business, and here we are today in 2025. So I run it with my 4 children, Tiffany, Chanel, Brittany, and Nicholas. And we're very much in the industry. We're considered to be leading and forward thinking in terms of hospitality.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you have a unique business where it's a boutique hotel, but you do have this sort of side business with artists. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works for you. I know in our pre-call, you were letting us know about some of the structure of that is because the artists own the work, and some people want to do photo shoots or corporate events within those rooms and marketing. How was that a different conversation with your kids in setting up your company? What did you have to think about in terms of protecting that model?
So the art actually came from, initially, we wanted to be different from the typical hotel room. So the art came first in the hotel rooms, right? So Tiffany, being a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, it was very challenging for her. First of all, even to set up the business, she did the structure, and the next thing is to have the contracts with the designer and also the artist. Today, the guest comes to Ode because of the art. And so we go looking at protecting the art and also protecting the artists. And the contracts that Tiffany did, I'm pretty sure the contracts are changing as we go, because initially we wanted to be unique. Today, the uniqueness of us is actually generating income from the guests coming to Ode because they want a different experience. And also a lot of it is generating income because they want the whole idea of looking at, streaming out and taking pictures for different events, and even corporate clients coming to us because we're so unique and using our art in their advertising. So Tiffany really have the challenge. She's the one that is stressed in terms of putting together the different contracts to protect Ode, because we own the art, but there's also trademark and copyright issues that came along, it grew out of that. Also, we have a very unique logo and brand name, and protecting that too. Again, Tiffany is the one that is taking care of that issue. The other thing too, we also have issue with security because our industry is moving towards self check-ins, And so we're looking at the guest now wants self-checking, so we have to provide the data or the information coming to us. And so that has to be protected too. So I'm very fortunate because the people that are taking care of that would be Tiffany, who's a lawyer, and also Brittany, my other daughter, who is a software engineer. So on my team, I'm lucky to have children who are well-versed and well-qualified to handle a lot of these risks.
Great. It's a fantastic overview. I have to get to that hotel. But Tasso, as Erica's just talking through, so she has several agreements that she has to think about, copyright agreements, security agreements, insurance agreements, and many entrepreneurs put in shareholder agreements. You brought that up at the very beginning. There's also wills, prenuptial agreements. These are all protectionist measures. But often, even when I talk to some of the small business owners out there, there's many others who don't want to talk about death or divorce. They're always like, oh, we don't, really want to get into that. No one really wants to think about it. Or there's a CEO in place. He's been around for a very long time. So maybe you could talk about why it's absolutely necessary for, particularly even family-owned run businesses, to have those conversations and what can happen if you don't have those in place.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire. No, those are all important. I call them agreements, documents, arrangements, whatever terminology you want to put in place. I always refer to them as you're memorializing a lot of decisions and a lot of key items within those agreements, whether it's a shareholders agreement, a will, a prenup, life insurance. There's other agreements, power of attorneys. There's trust agreements, there's charters and constitutions that some families put in place, and they're all important and they all have a role to play in protecting the business and protecting the assets of the owners of some of these businesses. A lot of families go through a lot to create a lot of value for the family, and it's important to ensure that, first of all, you understand the role of each of these documents, what they mean to the key stakeholders, the families, and how they interact is what I also refer to many times. So memorializing all this is all very, very important. It's really having those rich discussions around putting these agreements and ensuring that everyone understands the role of each of them. And essentially, it's really protecting the assets at the end of the day, whether you think of, a post-nup, and some of them play an important tax role as well in different ways, whether you think of life insurance and trust. Those are arrangements and documents that actually ensure that assets are properly protected. And as I said, all of these items have to work together because it's very important that your shareholders agreement connects to your life insurance, connects to your will, connects to your trust agreements, because those are assets that actually exist within a trust and how they interact. A lot of people don't understand that sometimes their value has been frozen in favor of these trusts. So all these are important, and it's important that you have these discussions early on. And if they're not early on, then eventually you're going to have to deal with these items. But it's probably better that you deal with them in advance of getting too far along, because then it's harder to have discussions, whether you think of a prenuptial agreement with someone, your kids or even the founder would want to have before they get married or before they're getting close to the wedding date, and ensure that those assets, and they understand essentially what they're doing. It's not taking away rights, but it's protecting the assets of the family that they've built. So.
And I'll ask both Tasso and Wayne, how often do you go back and review these agreements? No one likes to think about death and divorce, but even the 35-year-old CEO could be hit by a bus, or marriages break down, and particularly in family businesses, they do want to protect the succession of their family business, and whether or not they've had that discussion before the marriage. How often do you sit down and say, let's have this review? What does that look like?
Great question, Claire. For me, I will review at a minimum once a year. Canada has very short summers, so you try to get one in the summertime, and then you'll get one in during their fiscal year end, maybe before they have their annual meetings. But we want to have a review because we don't know. Maybe they forget to tell us that they have a new member of the family. Someone got married, someone got divorced. There's some compelling event, and we have to make the adjustments. So we We will come out, do the original assessment, and then we're going to ask the client, how often would you like to meet? We can do it 6 months, we can do it one year, but usually it's a minimum of 1 year because we want to make sure that we're dealing with the most relevant information to give the best advice should something change or not.
Yeah, I would agree in general with Wayne. There are some agreements that you would look at on a more regular basis annually, as Wayne points out. There's some things that you may not want to look at annually, such as a will, but it's more periodic. So somewhere, especially if you're going through a lot of change in your life, you may want to look at your will annually if there are changes. But minimum of 3 to 5 years, or some documents that are more permanent in nature. So call it a trust agreement that's been put in place, or shareholders agreement that is sometimes difficult to get a unanimous shareholders agreement redone, but definitely check-in points are always important. So from annual to every few years, but I guess being close to your client and staying on top of all these areas, life insurance is an area that you probably want to see a little more often and review, because things are changing, values are changing, needs are changing. Wayne talked about key man insurance versus shareholder or buyout insurance. Those are two very different needs, and you have to look at them at different points in time, and as well as critical illness as well. So.
Exactly.
So Erica, you mentioned you have the company with your 4 kids, which is very exciting, but also that's a lot of family members in one room. And you mentioned you started this up outside of COVID, so you probably spent a lot of time during COVID as well together as a family. How do you split up your family responsibilities? And when it comes to something like a shareholder agreement, do you have one that clearly defines the roles and how to handle like disputes and splitting income within the family?
Great question. So initially, I would say that we learn because we're in the startup phase, we learn from the initial meetings were a lot of voices, a lot of opinion. What we found out as time went, what worked really well for us was a clear separation of duties. So now we have the 5 of us really clear on what we're responsible for, and that really works. Another thing that we've implemented that's very productive now is where we have micro or small meetings. For example, the marketing team might be only 2 people, opposed to all 5 of us being in one room trying to make decisions. So the 4 main team members that really have a lot of the responsibility in the business is Tiffany, who's a corporate lawyer. Then we have Brittany. Brittany is a software engineer who deals with all of the data and the website and things of protecting the data for our guests. Nicholas and Chanel, they're more with the Instagram and protecting the reputation of the business. And myself, my responsibility really is to take care of the guests who wants to get to the hotel. In terms of shareholder agreements, so Tiffany is the agreement between all of us in terms of we're looking at our responsibilities, we're looking at payout. Our big issue is when someone leaves. The first person who would be leaving is myself. So I'm glad that Wayne brought up the topic. He's an expert on insurance and also doing and wills. So that was one of the big things because I would be leaving first. The business started with my children. I'm just at the end of my working, I would say, life because I want to retire, right? So I'm looking at phasing out, and therefore, then they continue with the business. So the shareholder agreement is in place. I think it constantly changes because all of them have full-time jobs, and they're looking at other things of bringing in other members, or when I leave, who replaces me. So there's it's a work in progress for us.
It's a constant conversation, it sounds like. And it's
Yes.
interesting that you just said, so it's possible that you might bring in other family members or other individuals later on as the company grows.
Correct. Because we're looking at also second location, and they're looking at one of the things that I had to make sure that's in place. I'm doing the operation. My responsibility is the operation of the business. So I have to make sure there are proper manuals in place. There are things so when I leave, someone can come in and take my place very easily. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I've been working on the last 3 years, really putting a really good procedure manual, things in place on a daily basis So when I leave, it doesn't mean that everything falls apart.
Right. Right. You want like a seamless transition for that
Correct.
role. Right. So Tasso, beyond death and divorce, we've kind of flicked at it. In today's technological world, cybersecurity is a growing topic. I think we could probably do an entire panel on cybersecurity and the major risks today. But talk a little bit about what it looks like for entrepreneurs today and why, it's not like cybersecurity insurance is a new thing, but why is it sort of top of mind for more individuals today?
Yeah, so as it's been on the agenda for a lot of business owners, and you talked about how often you need to check in on cybersecurity. That's a topic that needs to be top of mind in many different ways. I think it's becoming, what's happening is you hear a lot more about cyber breaches, and it's headline news in some instances, and some of these breaches can actually hurt the company in a serious way, both in ransom as well as operations. It kind of brings the operations down to its knees. So there's a lot of time spent around this area, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when will it happen. So that's a big topic of discussion, because some people think or believe that it will never happen to them, or they have the right protection measures. And the unfortunate part is that it will happen to every organization. It's really how you recover from it, whether a combination of processes of coming out of it, having the proper insurance, all these things need to be addressed on an ongoing basis. I think AI is also changing the landscape. AI may make cybersecurity, we hear about, AI giving the opportunity for these hackers to actually kind of imitate individuals, both in their voice and even physically. So that becomes a lot scarier. So it's on the front burner in a lot of, I sit on a few corporate private boards, and it's on our agenda on a regular basis. We have check-ins. We're assessing the AI, we're assessing the insurance needs of the company. We're assessing to ensure that they have the right team and the dedicated teams in some instances. And if the company is small enough that they've outsourced that responsibility to a reputable firm, that will help them in protecting. There's also a big topic amongst high net worth and ultra high net worth people, because once they sell their business, they actually don't even have the business infrastructure to protect them. And in some instances, that becomes a topic of discussion. But at the business level, definitely a very important area, and especially as a result of AI.
Mm-hmm. And Wayne, are you hearing similar things, with ChatGPT and AI and impersonations? Is that a topic that's growing of great concern among your clients?
100%. When you go back to when I was doing cyber, it was called internet security. That's how long ago it was for me when I was in the industry. All the bad guys were outside, all the good guys were inside. Easy. And then all the good guys and the bad guys were on the cloud, on the phone, inside and outside. And now they're virtual in AI. So the threat landscape has expanded exponentially in the last 5 years. And as we move towards quantum computing, and encryption can be cracked in seconds, what used to take months and years to crack traditionally, quantum computing might be able to dispose of encryption keys in seconds. So companies really need to look at, this is not my lane. It's not my lane. I'm going to give it to someone else. So you can look at your property and casualty insurance, add your cybersecurity riders, so you have a mitigation squad to come in. If you think about, I believe it was last year, I was in Vegas for a convention, and the entire airport systems got hacked and were shut down. I believe it was the Sabre system, and every airplane was grounded in that part of the United States. Then in the same year, MGM casinos and the other casinos were hit, and the casinos that were hit that had the cyber insurance paid the ransomware through their insurance policies, and they were back up and running. But MGM was very strong-headed and decided that they were not going to pay, and they were down for days. I don't know what it cost them, but it cost them a pretty penny. So for smaller companies where cybersecurity is not their expertise, understand this: 95% of all cyber attacks can be avoided by most reputable companies. But there's 5% that no one can stop. No government can stop them. No one can stop these people. They're the best of the best. Back in the day, there was something called script kiddies, and script kiddies would go out and on the dark web and gather their tools and stick those tools on the company. Now AI is allowing you to create those tools. So time to value for the bad guys is much faster. So you need someone who is 7/24, 365, watching your back. And that's where you're going to need to bring in third-party companies, as per what Tasso said. But also you want to make sure that your insurance coverage from a property and casualty perspective has those things in place. Depending on what industry you're in, you might be more susceptible or less. But what the hackers are looking for is the lowest common denominator. Whoever's in the IT ecosystem that they believe is the easiest place to enter, that's where they're going to go, and that might be you.
Mm-hmm. Eric, as a business owner, this probably sounds all terrifying to you. Like, is the cybersecurity part of your conversation? Was that in your startup conversations coming out of launching the company?
We're getting to that place because our guest is now looking for self-check-in. And so because they want there's more data now that we have to verify ID. So we're looking at that external software that would be between us and the guests to protect them. So this software that Brittany is always constantly looking at, which software we can use to make sure that that company is reputable in terms of holding the data for our guests. So there will always be a company between us and the guests. But it's something that we have to I think what keeps us up, like we're definitely thinking about that all the time, because we want to move in the industry where it's going, but there's a cost factor, and we are very small. So yes, it's something we're going towards, but it's slowly going towards that direction.
I always tell my clients sometimes you're one click away from a breach, right? It just takes one click, and unfortunately, you've got it could hurt your business in a big way. And I think Wayne talked about the insurance piece. Some people take it for granted that they have an insurance policy. They probably have a business interruption, and they're not looking at the fine print in relation to some of the requirements to ensure that they're properly protected. Insurance will help to some degree, obviously not totally, but at least it will soften the blow when this happens. So.
Right. Tasso, along with that, I would just add that the human firewall is the weakest point in the security posture. And what you need to look at are the education systems you're going to put in place to train your people on how to see social engineering, how to understand the different threat vectors that are coming at them, so they at least have a understanding of how they could be used as a pawn in someone else's game. And once you do that education and awareness, that's probably the easiest way for you to strengthen your human firewall.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Wayne, because in our firm, we've actually put in an education process where if you don't take it, your computer gets locked down so that you can continue. So the education is a requirement. Some of the insurance policies require it. So that's also another piece of the education and training.
I just want to say in terms of how it works with us, that's why division of roles and responsibilities is so important, because anything that has to do with the computer or site or online, because of Brittany, that's her area of expertise, that's her full responsibility. So because my knowledge is limited, I don't go into that lane. And that's one of the things, because of course, as you said, human error is what can cause a lot of issues in that area. So yes, for sure, that's one of the reasons why we make sure your knowledge is going to decide which area of the business that you handle.
You've identified it. I am not a techie person myself, Erica, so I appreciate that. You're like, I'm not even going to put myself in the position that I might hit the link. So I won't be opening emails for the company until they're vetted by Brittany. That's fantastic.
It's very interesting the habits you create, and obviously as the managing partner of Richter, I'm obviously super concerned because I have a high, a significant authority. So every email I get to take, to do a wire transfer, to approve something, I always do a reply to the person as opposed a forward, as opposed to a reply, because I may be replying to a hacker as opposed to forwarding the email to the person who actually made the request, or I'll send them a text. if I have their cell number, just to validate. So these are the things, the habits you create in order to ensure that you're not caught with on your heels in some way.
Exactly. You want to prove that the person on the other end can't deny that it's the person you actually want to deal with. The term is non-repudiation. And you have some techniques in terms of things like two-factor or multi-factor authentication that can help you do that.
Right.
But what I would recommend, Erica, for you would be to enlist a company to do a vulnerability assessment so you can get an idea of where you're at for what your industry requires. Every industry is different. I kind of want my nuclear plants to be a little more secured in your hotel, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So for what the hotel level of vulnerability is, if there's a 1 to 10 on that, you want to know if you are a 10 or if you're a 1, and then you want to mitigate those risks and then keep an ongoing check-in on what your security posture is. Because every time you make a move, add, or change to any device in the ecosystem of your IT, you expose yourself to new vulnerability.
I do want to just sorry, go ahead, Erica.
No, I was just saying to Wayne, like, it's something that, as I said, we've been discussing, and so for sure, I do appreciate that advice. For sure, we have been looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I just want to remind our viewers today, if you do have a question, you can put it into the Q&A box, and we will be getting to some live audience questions in a few minutes. But one of the things, Tasso, you brought up, and I want to kind of just jump ahead, is business interruption insurance. You know, this was, as an insurance, I cover insurance for the Globe as well, and business interruption was a very big story during the pandemic. There was a lot of companies who had business interruption, and there, as you pointed out, Tasso, if you don't know your fine print, the pandemic was a clause in many policies. Not all. There was a few, very, very few. And one of them that stood out for me, there was a group of dentists who had a business interruption that included pandemic policy,
Right.
but not many. Coming out of the pandemic, it's kind of hopefully going to be in the background for many people, but has that scared off businesses from utilizing that type of protection when we talk about business interruption, or is it just a conversation that you have to kind of craft a little bit differently with clients to let them know that that's kind of maybe a one-off scenario? I'm not sure where it lands.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, insurance, as Wayne mentioned, is a topic that you should be discussing with your client. And insurance means, business insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, all these areas. I think it's, lessons learned, and a lot of people never expected a pandemic like that, of that magnitude. And clearly people are a little more focused on what are they missing, and it's blind spots. It's managing risk, right? As we always say. So they need to look at the fine print, understand what they're covered, make sure that they get the proper advice and the proper expertise around looking at some of these insurance policies, whether life or business interruption or business insurance in general. They really need to kind of get into that detail, because it goes to prove that, sometimes the details do matter. So again, it's risk management in many ways.
Wayne, did you have any thoughts on the business interruption coming out of the pandemic?
100%. When you locate your business next to a bunch of power lines, or you're near a fault line, there are people who live in certain areas that are more vulnerable than others. The insurance company is going to come to the table with that risk already priced in. But there are two assessments I used to do back in the day. Maybe they've changed the names of them, but one of them is a business impact assessment, where someone will come in, third party, and do a risk analysis of what you need, again, industry specific. And the other thing I would do is a threat risk assessment. And we would, again, give you those two reports and show you what your risks are, what your exposures are. And then we would map that back to the proper insurance to ensure that you're covered for those things that we know are known exposures for your industry, for your business specifically, and for your location or locations.
Great.
Yeah.
Erica, I do want to jump back. We're talking about some insurance policies. We talked a little bit about what keeps you up at night. And in addition to cybersecurity, there's other types of insurance that you can have in place for protection. I know in our call, you were letting me know about like a shareholder's life insurance agreement, as well as some of the general liability to your property and commercial policies. What does your insurance setup sort of look like right now? I know you're a very young business at the moment. There's lots to think about in insurance, but what are you in the planning stages of?
So we have the general liability insurance which covers our assets, which is quite interesting because one of the most expensive assets in our room is our art.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have life insurance. Something happens to.
Oh, I think did Erica freeze for everyone or just for me? Okay, we'll wait till she comes back on.
Or something happens to me. So, and those are the two major ones that we have. But listening to Tasso and and also on Wayne, that's the area of expertise. I can see that we need to talk about other areas that we need to protect ourselves. We just have the very basic, the general and life insurance for myself.
Mm-hmm. Great. You kind of broke up a little bit, Erica, but I think we got the gist of it. You're in the early planning stages, and it will be something that you'll incorporate into your following meetings for your company.
Correct.
Wayne, you talked a little bit about corporate critical illness and how that's important to have it. But when it comes to protecting a business from the loss of a key employee or an owner, what are the key factors to consider in designing a key person insurance strategy?
Great question. First things first, you need to know who is who in the zoo and what their value is, extrinsic and intrinsic to the organization. So your key people need to be in place in order for the business to thrive. And if something were to happen to them, you need to be able to replace that person and or buy time to settle down your external third parties, interested third parties like banks and other private lenders that may be offering you money or equipment because that person was their guy or their gal. So we put together the key person insurance so that we can find replacements, that we can retain employees. So let's say you have a key person. We say, listen, we'd like you to be CEO over here and replace the big kahuna. And that person says, well, I got another offer from another company. Well, you know what? If you stay with us for X amount of time, the insurance policy that we bought through the corporation when you were X age, which was 5-6 years ago, we will give you that policy if you stay for a number of years with us. And the employee will do the math because the corporate insurance, when done with a whole life policy, has two components, a death benefit and a cash value. And that cash is tax-free in the policy and can be tax deferred for the growth of the policy. And you'll never be, unfortunately for myself, I'm 21 years old plus tariffs. I'll never be 21 again, but imagine if someone offered me a policy at my age of 21 and said, you can have this policy and 6 or 7 digits on the other end if you stay and do what we're asking you to do for this transitional time. So key person insurance can be used to attract, it can be used to retain, it can be used to mitigate the risk of someone having a catastrophic event, them dying, big problem. Critical illness key person insurance is going to ensure that I can get the money that's required because not all drugs are covered. We're in Ontario, I am in Ontario. Not all drugs are covered by OHIP. Not all procedures are covered by OHIP. And the time it could take for that person to get treated in Ontario could take a longer time than the business can handle. But Buffalo is right next door. And if you have the critical illness policy, it's a lump sum tax-free amount of money that you can get in your car and go to Buffalo and get seen today and solve your problem and have that very key person back in the saddle in weeks or days compared to months or years under our system. And no shade to universal healthcare. I love our healthcare system. I just know that with the aging demographics and what's happening with the baby boomers and the generation before them, as we get older in Canada, it's going to become harder and harder to find the people we need to get what we need to get done. And that critical illness policy, you can go anywhere in the world with that policy. So usually when I structure the policy, I structure it with an exchange rate uplift. We're about 37 cents to the US dollar. If someone's making 100 grand, I do the math and I'll add 37% to it because they may end up in Buffalo. or the
That's
Mayo Clinic.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure many business owners would have thought about the idea of going across the border for healthcare with that policy. So that's it's an interesting thing to think about. Tasso, I'm interested in your thoughts on critical illness because I know writing for individuals on insurance, life insurance is sort of, when you're doing wealth management planning, that's just part of the process. You have your savings here and you have your insurance policies. Critical illness usually gets overlooked. It's usually part of a group benefit plan. It's very minimal amounts. But why is that different for business owners? As Wayne kind of points out in that interesting example, do you have to bring it up, or is it business owners do think about this?
I would say more often than not, they don't, to be honest. So it's kind of on the pecking order of insurance and protecting your business. I would say it's either at the bottom or almost close to the bottom. And it is, and people say that obviously, that it's a high risk area. People will likely get ill at a point in time. And then what does that do to your business? And you want to make sure that key stakeholders and key executives have proper, critical illness in place to ensure that the business is properly protected. But it is an area that's overlooked, I would say, more often than not.
Yeah, I just want to say one of the things that this is new to me. Critical illness is something we haven't considered, I think, because we're thinking, well, the kids are young, and insurance for us was about, especially life insurance or key person insurance. I'm the major person that's insured. I have the highest policy because, of course, I'm the one that's the oldest. So I'm glad that that's an interesting point that I'm making notes that we should definitely look at. Yes, for sure.
Erica, I love that for you. I just want to say this. One of the things with family businesses is that some of the kids are involved. Seems like all of yours are. But in some of the companies that I'm working with, many of the children are not involved. So the kids who are involved with the business may receive the business from a succession planning perspective, but the kids who aren't involved in the business will need to receive something. And this is where you can use life insurance as an equalization payment to say, I'm going to give these kids the business. What would that be worth to the kids who are not involved in the business? I will now go get insurance that will cover off their proceeds when I pass. The other thing I want you to consider is that critical illness has a component called return of premium, which means if you do not get sick and you've been paying every year diligently and you don't get sick by the time the policy expires, and it can expire at 75 or 100 depending on how you structure it, the return of premium on maturity or return of premium of death can be paid for not by the corporation, but by the individual. So the corporation pays for the critical illness, but the individual pays for the return of premium. So why would you do that, Wayne? Let me tell you why. The reason you do that is because when you do the return of premium, you pay out of it personally. When the payment comes at death or the payment comes at maturity, it comes to you tax-free.
Tax-free. Excellent.
Tax planning.
Yes,
That's
tax
a whole
planning.
other risk. We need to do we could do a whole other tax planning session. That'll be our next one, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Just before I dive into audience questions, I just want to take a moment for viewers to check your inbox. We're going to be sending out a survey regarding our discussion today, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to complete it. So we do have some audience questions, and I'm going to just scroll through and we'll see who wants to jump in and answer them. So from one audience member, sometimes businesses are set up quickly and things start to move in the gig economy. Many are establishing freelance businesses. What strategies would you recommend for those who are looking to secure their own independent side businesses? What type of structure should they consider, and how does one isolate liabilities within this? So side businesses, that's a good question.
That's a good one. I'll let Tasso go with that, and then I'm going to add my pieces if you don't get to it, Tasso.
So look, as probably some of the greatest businesses have started off as a side business and or a hobby business, and then evolved into significant businesses. Typically, they start off by not setting up a structure, but rather doing it in their own name, and then I would say they have to evaluate the risk and, the issue of liabilities, isolating liabilities. Obviously, corporate structures or what we call limited partnerships, but typically companies are the standard way of operating businesses, and more often than not. And I think it's probably making an assessment of when you need that and when would you put it in place, and then how do you move the business from your name into that business, which of course can be done on a tax-free basis. But it's always trying to assess at what time do you move into it. There are certain tax benefits in operating in a corporate structure as opposed to your own name. Corporations get a slightly better tax rate in comparison to an individual. So these are all the things you need to check in with a professional to assess at what point in time do I need to either incorporate or move into an environment that would isolate me from liabilities and risks. So
Exactly. Well said, Tasso. I think about my smaller clients where they have a hairdressing salon in their home, in their basement, or a barbershop, or they're baking cakes. In the West Indian community, we have this thing called black cake or rum cake. Let me tell you, this cake will knock you on your butt if you don't respect it. But this cake is full of raisins and currants, and they just pour rum on it all year, and they soak the fruit for a year in overproof rum. And then at Christmas time, it's unbelievable. But let me tell you, if you run a home-based business and you do not have a rider on your home insurance for that business, and that residential fridge that you bought is now doing commercial work, and it goes up in flames, and the inspector comes to your home and sees all these boxes half charred with your name on it, Wayne's Cakes, they're going to ask one question. Are you in the cake selling business? Yes, I am. Because you're in shock. You tell the truth. No insurance for you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So think about your gig businesses, whatever you're running at home. If someone walks up on your doorstep and they trip and fall on your doorstep, or trip and fall somewhere else and said they tripped on your doorstep, and they sue you, there's a good chance that your personal assets are in play because you do not have that insurance.
I think for us, I just want to add to that. I think for us, what Tiffany was very instrumental in setting up the structure of as a corporate and a corporation across a federal corporation opposed to a provincial, and in order to protect us from also liability. So that's from day one. We was always set up as a corporation.
Eric, I have a question for you from a viewer that is asking, do you advise the artists on their business decisions? Is that a revenue stream for you? I don't know if you're doing business consulting with them, but tell us a bit about how some of these businesses do come in and they do pay to use the art. Is that correct?
Yes. So the art is actually and have become revenue generating for us. It was not the intention when we first started, but it's the interest is actually because they're so unique. So the art, we own the art, and now we have, say, a company comes in, we have Tiffany deals with the company directly in terms of the contract and saying, is the art part of your advertising or is the room part of your streaming out advertising? So that has become a real income generating, but also an area where we have to protect ourselves. And we also going forward, the contract with the art now is going to have a commercial part of it where we have the authority to use the art as for revenue.
Right. So that would be a company that comes and rents the room and has the art and does it for their own marketing things. But do you advise any of the artists who you buy the art from? Do you advise any of the artists on their business decisions as well?
So that was not the initial relationship with the artist. The artist used the room as a canvas for their art, and we own the art. So it was never about advertising for them. It was about supporting them because this was during COVID. So we're supporting the local artists in the area. And how we help them today is that they're able to, they have followers and they can tell them, well, one of my piece is that, oh, this is the room. And so they can send their followers back and they take pictures, and I'm sure they're able to generate revenue. We also, on our website, we also promote the artists.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're very supportive of the artists.
So building their brand through that as well.
Yes.
A great question here about what are top three tips you would recommend to business owners who haven't put serious thought into the fine details of securing their businesses. So of today's discussion, what would be sort of maybe just quickly three top tips that you would have? Very quickly though, because we're at about 5 minutes left of the discussion. I want to get a few more questions in.
Tasso, you want to go? You want to go for it?
Yeah, look, I mean, the idea would be is to take a step back, look at your business, understand. I mean, obviously, entrepreneurs understand their business, assess what risks are specific in general for business, but then also specific to their industry or their sector. Consult specialists. That's always a good thing to do because you don't know what you don't know, right? And when you consult people like Wayne and others, legal counsel to assess risk on legal matters, financial people to assess financial risk, those are all things that I would take a step back. Although complicated, you can get the proper guidance and advice on how to manage some of these risks. Wayne?
Thank you. You know what? You don't know what you don't know. You're what we call as unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. And when you work with folks like Tasso and myself, we're going to ask you the questions that you didn't even know you needed to ask. And that's probably where you're going to discover what your posture is and where you want to go. So risk management is pretty simple. What's the best that can happen? What's most likely to happen? What's the worst that can happen? And if the worst that can happen, you can handle it with what you have in place, you might be okay. But someone, third party, who understands your industry and understands your business may be better than you because they have comparables and you don't. Bring them in, get the assessment done, and you will discover where you are, and then you make the adjustments accordingly.
My advice would be to know your limitations and seek advice from the experts, because they're the one that would be protecting your business. Because I mean, the risk out there is so vast, we are learning as we go. So I would say, know your limit. Like, be honest with yourself in terms of your knowledge. You know your limitations. Seek advice from the experts so they can come in and protect and save your business and your assets.
Agreed.
Back to the cybersecurity, I knew it would be an interesting one, but someone's asking, what are some of the recovery strategies for businesses that have suffered losses due to cyber attacks?
Wayne, over to you.
No problem. You have to ask yourself whether you need the 3 levels of backup: hot, warm, and cold. Cold backup is you have a machine just like yours, not plugged in, somewhere offsite. And when they blow your machine up, you go find that machine, you bring it in, you turn it on, and you boot up and you go. Warm is you have a machine like that one, but it is a few minutes, hours, or days behind in terms of its configuration. So it may not have the latest and greatest. Maybe it doesn't have Tuesday's data, but it has last Friday's data. So you're a little bit behind, but you've only lost 1 business day. Hot is this machine is running real time or almost real time with the machine that is in production. And that machine has an exact copy of everything that's running all the time. Cold is the least expensive. Hot is the most expensive. Your industry and the regulators of your industry and the experts will tell you which one makes the most sense to you. But as all of us have lost a SIM card that had all the pictures of our baby on it, and it got wet or it got broken and we didn't have a backup, it's the worst feeling in the world. Trust me. So backing up and having your resiliency plan in place, that's appropriate. We don't want to spend $2 to protect one. This is why we need the assessment from the third party to let you know you're doing the right thing at the appropriate level, because we're not looking to bankrupt you and to say, oh yeah, I have great cybersecurity, but I'm out of business because I have no cash flow. We want to make sure we're doing the right things at the appropriate level.
I'm going to squeeze in one more question. It's a pretty big question, and Tasso and I have done a whole panel on this, so I would also maybe forward the panel along. But in managing business and investment risk, what governance structures or decision-making frameworks have you found most effective for aligning multiple generations or family stakeholders? And really, I'll throw it to you, Tasso, because it reminds me of the whole succession planning panel we had multi-generational families on that panel.
Yeah, I agree, Claire. This is a big question, and I'll keep it short because I know we've run out of time. But it's an area that a lot of families these days are exploring to try to ensure that they have the right people. They sometimes start off with, either a board of advisors at the business level or a family board of advisors. But sometimes they move to a formal board. And I think a lot of them are realizing that it's very, very helpful to get expertise around the table, help them guide the business and the family on different matters. And as you said, I can speak about this topic for an hour, but I've seen a lot of movement in this area and a lot of interest by a lot of families, especially as they grow their business. They just want that expertise around them, and also at the family level to deal with some of the succession issues. So.
Yeah, I heard an example of one family business that was so large and it had so many non-contributing family members, but they were all stakeholders. So they had once a year a family picnic. They all wore baseball hats. If you were working in the company, they were like red and they had titles on them. And everyone else had sort of just, I'm a family member, shareholder, and they were blue. And it was hilarious, like hundreds, we're talking a big family.
Multi-generational.
Multi-generational.
Yeah.
We have hit the mark here, 1:30. We could probably go on longer as the questions come in, but we do have to leave it there. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to thank Tasso, Wayne, and Erica. Thank you for joining us today and for being so candid in your conversation. A special thank you to our sponsor, Richter, for making today's event possible. And of course, a big thank you to all of you who joined us today in the audience for tuning in. We'll display a QR code on the screen allowing you to complete our survey, and a link to the recorded webcast will be sent to all registered participants within the next 2 weeks. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.